I just needed a ride. A 5-minute favor. But Coach Whitmore didn't offer anything for free. Now, every time I see him at practice, I can still hear what he whispered before I stepped out of his truck. My name's Camille, I'm 43, and I've been a wife longer than I've been anything else. 19 years married to a man who calls from work more often than he looks me in the eye at home. We live in the kind of suburban cul-de-sac that feels like a trap disguised as safety. Cookie-cutter lawns. Morning joggers. Everyone pretending not to notice when your porch light stays off for 3 nights straight. Our son, Elijah, is 15. He's the one bright thing I still feel proud of. He's been playing football since he was 8, and he's good enough that the coaches actually care. That's where Coach Whitmore came in. I used to drop Elijah off at practice every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday until our second car finally gave out. My husband promised we'd replace it soon, but soon has stretched into 7 months. So I started asking for help. Rides. Favors. Little humiliations. And when I finally texted Coach Whitmore to ask if he could give me a lift home after practice one night, I told myself it was no different from asking a neighbor. But it was. Coach Whitmore is 48, maybe 49. Tall, tired-looking, in that rugged, just finished working outside kind of way. He doesn't smile easily. But when he does, it's slow and knowing, like he already knows how you're going to respond before he speaks. The first time I really noticed him was last year, during a scrimmage. I was sitting alone on the bleachers. My husband didn't show. He rarely does. Coach had just finished yelling at the boys when he walked past me, wiping sweat off his neck with the edge of his shirt. He looked down at me not like a coach looking at a parent. More like a man noticing a woman. I didn't flinch. I smiled, maybe too long. He nodded, kept walking. But after that, I started catching his eye more often. During water breaks, during practice pickups, in the parking lot when I lingered just a little too long, pretending to check my phone. He didn't say much, but I could feel something hanging there like an unspoken dare. The night I asked him for that ride, it was drizzling. My hair was already frizzing by the time I got Elijah to the field. Coach Whitmore was standing by his truck, clipboard in hand, rain beating on his forearms. I approached with my umbrella, said, "Hey, Coach, any chance you could drop me home after practice? I'm just a few blocks over." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Sure, long as you don't mind conditions," he said. I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he didn't smile. "I don't give anything without strings," he added. Then walked off to yell at the boys. I told myself he was teasing, that it was just his dry sense of humor. But when the rain got heavier and the lights finally went off on the field, and I climbed into his truck, I felt it. Something tight between us. The cab smelled like sawdust and cologne. His jacket was tossed in the back. A packet of sunflower seeds sat between us in the console. We rode in silence at first, just the sound of wipers dragging across glass. Then he asked, "What's your husband do again?" I paused. "Financial planner." He nodded like that confirmed something. "Busy guy, I bet." "Very." He didn't press. But the way he said it, like he already knew the whole story. Like he'd seen the way I sat alone at games, the way my shoulders folded inward when I thought no one was watching. When we hit a red light, he looked over at me. "You don't strike me as someone who's used to being ignored," he said quietly. I looked away. My throat tightened. We pulled up outside my house, and he didn't turn the truck off. I reached for the handle, but stopped when I heard him say, "You ever think about wanting more?" My hand froze. "More what?" I asked, not turning. He didn't answer. Just said, "Same time next week?" I nodded slowly and stepped out. As I closed the door, he leaned over the seat and said, "Just remember, rides aren't free." The next week, he picked me up again. This time, the truck was cleaner, warmer, like he'd thought about it. We didn't talk much, just small things. The weather, the game. He asked if Elijah ever talked about quitting. I said no, he loves it. "You raised a fighter," he said. "Wonder where he gets it from." We pulled up to my place again. But I didn't get out this time. We sat there for a moment in the dark. "You ever think about just driving?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "Not going in. Just keep going. 5 hours, 10. Somewhere nobody knows your name." His eyes were on me, heavy, unmoving. And in that moment, I felt it. That pull. That hunger I'd buried under years of grocery lists and bills and routine. I should have left. Should have thanked him and stepped out. But instead I said, if I did, what would the conditions be? He leaned closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat from his breath. And then, the porch light flicked on. I jumped like I'd been burned. My husband stood on the steps, phone in hand, staring. Coach Whitmore didn't flinch. He leaned back in his seat and said, "Guess you'll find out next week." I stepped out, legs trembling. And as I walked up the drive, I knew something had shifted. I hadn't crossed the line, but my foot was already on the edge. The next morning, my husband didn't say a word. He poured his coffee like he always did, 3 scoops, 1 sugar, no cream, then sat at the table across from me without lifting his eyes. I waited for something. A question, a cold remark, even a sarcastic jab. But there was nothing. Just the clink of his spoon and the occasional turn of a newspaper page. I'd barely slept. The air in our bedroom had felt different, thick and suspicious. He hadn't touched me as he climbed into bed last night. He always places his phone on the nightstand. Last night, he kept it with him. I could still feel the imprint of Coach Whitmore's stare on me. His words, still circling like a storm, "Guess you'll find out next week." But I didn't know what that meant anymore. Because now, I wasn't sure who was playing who. I told myself I'd cancel the ride. I even typed the text. But I deleted it before sending, because part of me wanted to see what the conditions were. It wasn't about desire, not fully. It was about being noticed. Being seen as someone who could still make a man pause. And Whitmore. He saw me like I hadn't been seen in years. Not as Elijah's mom. Not as his wife. But as Camille. When he picked me up that Thursday, the air was hotter than usual. The windows were halfway down. He didn't say anything at first, just drove. But then, just past the light on Redwood Avenue, he pulled over. "Come on," he said, unbuckling. "Come where?" He nodded toward a narrow path between 2 industrial buildings. There was a bench under a dead tree, barely visible from the road. We sat there, in the silence, cars whooshing faintly in the distance. He didn't touch me, but his presence, God, it wrapped around me like static. I told him things I hadn't said out loud in years. How my husband hadn't looked me in the eye since 2019. How I used to write poetry and stopped after Elijah was born. How I sometimes stood in front of the bathroom mirror and couldn't recognize the woman staring back. He listened, really listened. And when I finally stopped talking, he didn't offer cliches. He didn't say, "You deserve better." He just said, "I'd give you different." And that broke something open. Not love, not lust, but possibility. The next time we rode together, I didn't ask where we were going. We just drove. No destination, no clock, and nothing happened. Not in the way you'd think. But I held his wrist a little longer when he passed me a bottle of water. He brushed a leaf from my shoulder and his hand lingered. And when our fingers touched, we didn't pull away. We crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But it wasn't physical. It was deeper, more dangerous. The night it all came crashing down started like any other. Elijah had a late practice. I stayed until the end, and Whitmore offered me a ride. But this time, when we pulled up in front of my house, the front door was open. Wide open. Whitmore didn't stop the engine. I stepped out slowly, feeling the weight of something coming. Inside, the living room lights were on. And on the coffee table, lined up like evidence, were 3 things. My phone, a folded-up hoodie from Whitmore's truck, and an envelope. Inside the envelope, photos, printouts, screenshots of me in Whitmore's truck, of me on that bench under the dead tree, zoomed in, cropped. My husband was in the kitchen, arms crossed. "I didn't need to follow you," he said. "You gave it all away in your eyes." I tried to speak, to explain, but he held up his hand. Then he handed me his phone. There was a video queued up. My own face, blurry but recognizable, in the passenger seat. I thought about confronting you weeks ago, he said, but I decided to wait. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't hurt. He was calm. I slept with someone, he said. My heart dropped. Who? He didn't answer. Just walked to the hallway and knocked on Elijah's bedroom door. It's time, he said. The door opened, and out stepped Nicole, Elijah's tutor, 28, blonde, polite. I'd invited her into our home, fed her, trusted her. She didn't look ashamed, just adjusted her purse strap and avoided my eyes. He turned back to me. You wanted someone who saw you, he said. So did I. Then he walked out with her. No yelling, no slamming doors, just quiet devastation. It's been 3 weeks since then. Elijah still goes to practice. Coach Whitmore still watches me when I drive away alone. I don't take rides anymore. I walk, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the heat, but always alone, because I learned something. Conditions are never about the ride. They're about the cost. And when the bill comes due, you never get to choose who pays it.